A large-scale drone attack attributed to Ukraine targeted Moscow and other Russian regions overnight, marking one of the most significant strikes since the war began. According to Russian state media, defense forces intercepted more than 300 drones, with 91 specifically directed at Moscow. The attack resulted in at least one fatality and several injuries, while causing significant disruptions to air travel and critical infrastructure in the Russian capital. The timing of the assault has raised speculation, as it came just hours before a high-profile diplomatic meeting between the United States and Ukraine in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. This meeting is intended to explore potential pathways to ending the war, which has now dragged on for over 2 years. The strike, analysts suggest, could be a strategic move by Ukraine to showcase its growing military capabilities and leverage ahead of the negotiations. While Ukrainian officials have not officially claimed responsibility for the attack, defense analysts point to Kyiv's recent advances in drone technology, enabling long-range precision strikes deep inside Russian territory. According to Russian reports, the Ukrainian drones targeted Moscow's outskirts, prompting emergency air raid responses. The Russian Ministry of Defense stated that the majority of the drones were neutralized before they could inflict severe damage, but disruptions in several key districts of the city were reported. In addition to the reported death toll, multiple civilian injuries were confirmed, with emergency response teams deployed to affected areas. This marks one of the deadliest Ukrainian drone strikes on Moscow since the war began, raising concerns within the Kremlin about Ukraine's increasing offensive capabilities. Moscow's mayor, Sergei Sobyanin, called the attack a blatant act of aggression and vowed a swift response. Russian military experts have suggested that Ukraine's drone program is reaching a level of sophistication that could significantly alter the strategic balance of the war. Reports indicate that Ukraine is now one of the largest producers of tactical and strategic drones, a development that has alarmed Russian military planners. Amidst this escalation, diplomatic efforts in Jeddah are being closely watched. The meeting, which is taking place behind closed doors at the Ritz-Carlton, features top US and Ukrainian officials. While President Volodymyr Zelensky is in Saudi Arabia for discussions with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, he is not directly participating in the U.S. Ukraine negotiations. Leading the Ukrainian delegation is Andriy Yermak, Zelensky's chief of staff, while U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio heads the American team. Sources close to the matter suggest that the U.S. delegation is adopting a cautious stance, primarily seeking to assess what concessions Ukraine might be willing to make in order to move towards a peace settlement. Rubio emphasized ahead of the meeting that the US is in listening mode, keen to understand Kyiv's negotiating position. "We need to know what Ukraine is realistically willing to offer as part of a potential agreement," Rubio stated, adding that the outcome of these talks would be instrumental in determining whether Washington resumes its military aid and intelligence sharing programs with Ukraine. These discussions come at a delicate time for US-Ukraine relations. Just 2 weeks ago, an Oval Office meeting between President Joe Biden and Zelensky ended in frustration, with reports suggesting that Biden was displeased with Ukraine's continued demands for military aid, without offering a concrete strategy for de-escalation. As a result, the US temporarily paused military assistance to Ukraine, citing a need for reassessment. According to sources within the Biden administration, the White House expects Ukraine to outline a set of concrete deliverables that would demonstrate a willingness to engage in meaningful peace negotiations. Despite this, Ukrainian officials remain cautious about making concessions that could be perceived as weakening their position. "Our priority is to ensure Ukraine's security and sovereignty, and we are prepared to engage in dialogue, but not at the cost of our territorial integrity," Yermak stated ahead of the Jeddah meeting. Following the drone strike, Russian officials have reiterated their stance that Ukraine's actions amount to terrorist aggression against Russian civilians. The Kremlin has hinted at possible retaliatory measures, including intensified missile strikes on Ukrainian cities. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov condemned the attack, accusing the West of enabling Ukraine's military advancements and warning of severe consequences. Meanwhile, international reactions have been mixed. European leaders have largely remained silent on the drone strike, while NATO officials continue to stress the importance of a diplomatic resolution to the conflict. The United Nations has urged both parties to exercise restraint, warning that further escalation could have catastrophic consequences for global stability. Adding to the complexity, U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witcomb is scheduled to visit Moscow later this week, potentially meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. This development has sparked speculation that back-channel discussions between the US and Russia may be taking place, aimed at de-escalating tensions and exploring a framework for negotiations. As the Jeddah meeting unfolds, the stakes remain high. While both Ukraine and Russia appear to be doubling down on their military strategies, diplomatic efforts are struggling to gain traction. With the US placing increasing pressure on Ukraine to make concessions and Russia hardening its position in response to recent attacks, the prospect of a swift resolution appears unlikely. For now, all eyes are on Saudi Arabia, where the next few hours could determine the trajectory of the conflict. Will Ukraine be able to secure continued US military support? Will diplomatic negotiations yield tangible results, or will the war continue to intensify? The answers remain uncertain, but one thing is clear. The conflict is at a critical juncture, with global implications hanging in the balance.